There we go. I'm late, I'm very, very late. In fact, I'm incredibly late. I'm late for an important date, and my date is, I'm supposed to be doing a video and I'm supposed to be doing a live stream, and I do apologise for being very, very late, but I did have an important date and I'm here now, so don't worry, we are going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and monsters and monster tactics, and we will be discussing the will-o-wisp. So if you're not familiar with my live stream videos, and you're re-watching it for the very first time, please look down in the description. You'll find the start time. So remember, start time down in the description. You don't have to watch the entire thing as I set up and do my sound check. And thank you, Aaron, for showing up. I do appreciate it, and for also commenting. It means that the chat box has a reason for being there, which is awesome. On top of that, if you have questions, comments, feedback, anything related to Dungeons and Dragons, I will be talking about will-o-wisp, the monster tactics, but if you have other questions related to being a player or a dungeon master, I will discuss them as well near the end of the presentation, when I've sort of spat out all the information that's in my brain and comes out of my mouth, basically. So let's get started, and let's get this show on the road. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons 5e, and we're talking about monster tactics for the will-o-wisp. The will-o-wisp. It's an odd creature, this will-o-wisp. In fact, one of the problems I have with the monster manual, the Dungeons and Dragons 5e monster manual, is the will-o-wisp is not exactly the same thing I remember in previous versions of the game, and I highly recommend going and watching AJ Pickett's video. He does monster ecology, and he does discuss will-o-wisp and how it sort of functions. And I remember watching, I believe it was an old movie about leprechauns and banshees and being drawn and lured into swamp areas and nasty bogs and stuff like this. And the will-o-wisp is the one that sort of stood out for me. It's one of those unusual monsters that really isn't a combat monster. It's actually it's more of an ambush creature. And on top of that, it's very, very peculiar in the way that it sort of functions. And what they've gone and done with Dungeons and Dragons 5e is they've turned it into an undead creature. It used to be a fey creature, and now it's apparently a very small, tiny, undead creature. I'm going to forgive Wizards of the Coast for doing such a thing, but we will move on and start discussing the will-o-wisp. So the will-o-wisp is a malevolent soul from evil beings that have perished in misery. And this is what apparently the new version of the will-o-wisp is. So if you please turn to page 301 of the monster manual, it gives you details on the will-o-wisp, and it gives you the stat block. Now I'm going to break that down into pieces. Starting off with the most obvious thing is, where do you find these strange and peculiar creatures? These unusual undead. They are found to thrive in forsaken lands, in swampy, boggy, foggy areas, sorrowful battlefields, places where great battles have taken place and many people have died, or many elves or dwarves or creatures have perished, and there's just a feeling of misery in that location. They are trapped in the place of their death, so they can't really leave it. They can't sort of leave and go somewhere else. They don't journey around. It doesn't sort of function like that. They are agents of evil that form a sort of symbiotic relationship with other creatures such as hags, oni, black dragons, and possibly even cultists, although they've got to be careful. All of these creatures, the hags, the oni, black dragons, and cultists, if they get themselves into a situation where they are near death, a will-o-wisp would take advantage of that if they thought they could get away with it. And it's not a particularly stupid creature. They've got a reasonable intelligence and quite a decent wisdom, so they are smart enough to know when they can capitalize on somebody's misfortune. So the will-o-wisp could also prey on one of the victims of a more powerful undead or other types of undead. So somebody walks into a location and it has a battle with some undead and they're significantly reduced in strength, then a will-o-wisp might then appear, make itself known, and then try to consume the life or at least shock their victim, and then consume its life once it's in a vulnerable position. This is how the will-o-wisp functions. So what do you do with the will-o-wisp? One of the things I find rather peculiar about the will-o-wisp is that a lot of people still seem to view it as a straight up frontline fighter, and it's not really that sort of monster. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. This is the sort of, yes, I do have a little will-o-wisp miniature. In fact, I have two, but I'm putting one out for now. The will-o-wisp lures its unwary victims into things like quicksand or quicksand pits. Now, quicksand won't kill you outright. Normal quicksand actually will only draw you down so far. You're moving around sort of, they're actually not going to probably suck you all the way down. But you will be trapped, restrained, vulnerable to attack, and that is when a will-o-wisp would capitalize on it. Or they might draw the victim into a monster's lair, or a trap that somebody else has set or created, or some other natural hazard that has been created from maybe the bog or from a forest area, or anything that they can utilize. Foggy area, anything that would have maybe projecting rocks, things like that. And then once their prey has fallen victim to this horrible location that they have been lured to, then they are going to feed on their prey, on their pain, or just capitalize on the fact that they have much reduced hit points and cause them as much suffering as possible. They are often mistaken for a lantern light that might be being carried by somebody in the distance. So you'll often come across these at night, and I think the best time to use them is when there isn't a lot of light. They have a very good dark vision. Their dark vision is like 120 feet, so they can see a long way, whereas normal characters and creatures only have about 60 feet dark vision, so their vision is very limited compared to something like the will-o-wisp. They are also mistaken for something like a campfire. So maybe it's a set location and they just stay there, and because they illuminate themselves, okay, they have variable illumination. It allows them to shed bright light in a certain distance, but when you think about a bright light, you're still going to see it from quite a long way away when it's dark, because there's no other light being shown, so obviously they're going to stand out in a dark location. Okay, so we've kind of set the background and how they sort of are and what they are and how they function a little bit. So now it's time to start talking about how you would use them in your game. The will-o-wisp is a very complex monster to run, and it tends to be treated, as I said, as a frontline fighter, which it isn't. So I'm going to show you how to use it in a way that isn't going to be a frontline fighter. There is no way to actually trap the will-o-wisp, and this is due to the fact that it has incorporeal movement. So even if you were to come up to something like this, it can move through the creature. It can move through obstacles simply because of its incorporeal movement ability. Now, obviously, it's not going to stop in something that's solid because it would take damage, and it's not an awful lot of damage, but it's still some damage, and it unfortunately doesn't have resistance to force damage, so it's not going to be wanting to do that. So, can't trap it. Once a will-o-wisp is injured though, should anybody ever manage to strike it, or it allows itself to be engaged in combat, which I don't think you should actually do at all, it is going to probably go and turn invisible. You can use an action to make it go invisible, and a will-o-wisp has got it all the time in the world. So invisible and flee or move away. You can't strike something that you can't see with an attack of opportunity. And really you're guessing as to where that will-o-wisp is. Once it goes invisible, it's then going to move. And that is the key to using the will-o-wisp when you need to actually move it out of combat. Make it go invisible and move. There's nothing to pick up. It's not like it stands on anything. It flies 50 feet. It can just fly 50 feet straight up. And there's not an awful lot that the players can do about that. And that is probably the best way to deal with them. Straight up once they're invisible, and they're no longer going to be vulnerable to your players' characters. Okay, will-o'-the-wisp is very smart, as I've already pointed out, high intelligence, high wisdom. They're smart enough to lure their prey into traps and cause their victims all sorts of grief, which means they're also smart enough to realize that they don't have to stick around in a fight. So as soon as they take damage, this is the time when the will-o'-the-wisp is going to probably take off. It can wait. It can just stay invisible and just follow their victim until they get into a bad situation. But what they can't do is leave the location that they are bound to. Remember, they are trapped in a particular place and location, so they don't go very far. You could also lure your party or an individual from the party into a pack of will-o'-wisps. So if you have more than one, and I've only got two here, but I would suggest if you're going to lure your party into a group of will-o'-wisps, then make sure you have at least as many as the party, if not more. As I said, they don't fight to the death. There's absolutely no need for them to. They're undead. Man, I'm really struggling with the concept of the will-o'-the-wisp being an undead. It just doesn't feel right at all. But it has all the time in the world, as I said. And this is the normal process for dealing with the will-o'-the-wisp. Let's move them off. The party will follow the will-o'-the-wisp. Once it gets into a bad situation, whether they get ambushed by, I don't know, what is this? This is a shambling mound. Okay, a battle of a shambling mound is bad. Once somebody starts going down in this battle, and I'm just going to turn things around a little bit. Once somebody goes down, this is when a will-o'-wisp will make itself visible again and try to feed on that victim. Remember, the consume life bonus action, will-o'-wisp can target one creature it can see within 5 feet if it has 0 hit points. Now, what I would do is I would go with the shock, which is action, and consume life, or even better, if they're already on 0 hit points and they're already down, then you can use your bonus action. You're going to become visible as soon as you use your consume life. You become visible, and once you've done that, you suck out their life, you regain hit points, and of course they've got to make a constitution saving throw. Otherwise, unfortunately, going to wind up very, very dead. And then you can use your action to go invisible again and move to a different location. It's a horrible monster to deal with. Just imagine that. You get into into trouble. This thing appears, makes itself visible, uses its consume life, and then once it's consumed the life, it then flashes out of visibility, going invisible, and moves away. And of course, it can go straight up in the air if it really wanted to. And there's not an awful lot you can do about that because most players won't figure that one out. So a horrible monster to deal with. And anything from the shambling mound to owlbears or something like that, all of those are certainly options. Luring the party or one of the individuals from the party into a group of will-o'-wisps. I don't like that strategy myself, but those are the things that I would suggest. So you can see what I mean. It's not the sort of monster that just goes out and starts shocking somebody. It's not like you go and you're going to go, oh, my first action is I'm going to become visible and I'm going to shock my target. Usually the shock is only if they can tell that there's already pain and anguish occurring and that the victim might be ready to cark it so that they can consume that life. So that is really how I would run the will-o'-wisp. And hopefully that has been helpful to you in some way. What page is it on? It is on page 301 of the Monster Manual, Aaron. Yep. So hopefully you found this useful in some way. So I'm going to state it again. I highly recommend that you don't use your will-o-wisp as a frontline combat monster. That you use it in conjunction with some other monster or hazard, okay, where the party have to contend with maybe it's an owlbear, or there are owlbears in the location, and this is when you can have more than one will-o-wisp. You could have 2, you could have 3, it's up to you. And then once somebody starts going down, this is when the will-o-wisp makes itself known, appears and capitalizes on somebody else's misfortune. So that is how I would run the monster myself. If you found this useful or informative or helpful in any way, please share and like the video. If you found this content interesting and you're hoping to see more content like this, then I do videos like this all the time. I do a video simply, every day there's usually a live stream or a published video. I have about 500 videos. So hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish a new video. If you want to support my channel, hey, you supported my channel right now watching this video. And if you found it useful, that's excellent. I'm really, really happy to hear that. I don't do Patreon, but down in the description, you're going to find an affiliate link. Usually it's for Amazon and the book depository, and you can buy stuff online if you do that sort of thing. I get a small commission for anything you buy. You pay exactly the same price. And the link that you go through, you don't even have to buy the thing that I've linked to. You can go through that link and then buy something else, and I'll still get some commission for that. So really helpful to me, and I do appreciate it when people buy stuff online. Okay, so that's covered everything. If you have questions, and I see that there are some comments that I need to address in the chat box, so start asking your questions, giving your feedback, and we'll have a discussion. Remember, this is a reference. There isn't an awful lot on how to run monsters for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and so this is just the beginning of building that reservoir, that reference for other people to use. If you have questions and feedback that you would like to give, something you would like to add because maybe I missed something, and it's entirely possible that I did, then you can put that down in the comments section once the live stream is published by YouTube. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Right there. There it is. Keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I haven't gone anywhere, Aaron. I am definitely going to respond to all of your comments. So hopefully I got the page right for you. So page 301, and you've got here, they just face these on Critical Role, except Matt linked them to urns. Destroy the urn, destroy the wisp. Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Look, you know how I feel about the monster manual and how the monsters are presented. I am all of the opinion that you should definitely, as a dungeon master, modify and change your monsters. Absolutely, you should do that. And that's what Matt Mercer has done, which makes perfect sense to me. Aaron, what do you got here? I thought they were Fae as well. Well, they are, but they changed them to undead. I really struggle with the concept of treating them as undead, but hey, we do what we can, and there's nothing wrong with you deciding that no, they're not undead, they're our tiny Fae instead. You know, who's going to stop you? You're the dungeon master. Alright, what else? Good idea for will-o-wisp. Tomb of Annihilation says you can't resurrect. Perhaps your NPCs or characters, when they die, they make a will-o-wisp and give the player a chance to catch them. Well, yeah, well see, that's the thing, the concept behind it. So they consume life. I'll read it out. As a bonus action, the will-o-wisp can target one creature it can see within 5 feet of it that has 0 hit points. Okay, so it doesn't have to, I mean, as long as you can see it, you can move up, as long as you're right next to it, and it's got to be in 0 hit points, and it's still alive. So it's not dead, but it's dying, so having to make death saving throws. The target must succeed on a DC 10 Constitution saving throw against this magic or die outright. So you fail this, and that's it, your character dies. If the target dies, the will-o-wisp regains 10 hit points or 3d6 hit points worth of hit points. So my understanding is, yes, that you could have them create another will-o-wisp, but it's dependent on the nature of the character. If the character has sort of a past which is a little bit untidy, maybe they've done a few things they shouldn't have done over time, then, you know, absolutely. I don't think it's so much something you would do with a good aligned character. Somebody who's got a good alignment or a neutral alignment. Remember, a will-o-wisp are the souls of evil beings that have perished in anguish and misery. So it would certainly make sense with an evil character, but I don't think it makes so much sense to transform one of your player's characters into a will-o-wisp when they have a good alignment. That doesn't quite make so much sense. But hey, you're the dungeon master. You can do what you like with it, no matter what anybody else says or what I say. Okay, all right. What else you got here? Maybe a lead-lined box to resurrect after they clear the curse. I think the easiest way to understand something like the will-o-wisp is you can set parameters around how difficult it is for them to be resurrected from these creatures. I don't have an issue with that. I think it's actually probably a very sensible thing to do. All of those suggestions and ideas sound like pretty legitimate things to me. But as I said, I'm always of the opinion with monsters that you should modify them, change them, give them the flavour that you feel that they need to have, and even add additional mechanics to them if you think it's going to be helpful to your game. But I still feel that the will-o-wisp is something that will feed on a bad situation, capitalise on the party walking into a nasty trap or a nasty location or having to face a terrible beast, and when they're at their most vulnerable, then it will capitalise on that and then try to finish them off and suck out their life. And I think that's covered the will-o-wisp pretty well. And since there aren't any more... Oh, here we go. I spoke too soon. What have you got here, Aaron? Yeah, might be a bit mean to put them in an encounter tough enough that one of them dies and then add a will-o-wisp, they lose a player. Yeah, it does feel a little bit horrible. I always like to give my players a way of continuing to play the character that they've just lost. And the chances are, with most battles, that you'll be able to drop at least one character to 0 hit points. And if you've got a will-o-wisp sitting in the background waiting for one of them to drop, the chances are there's a very high probability that they're going to lose that character. Constitution saving throws for low-level characters are going to be very tough, and for higher-level characters, not so much of a problem. And if they have a paladin with them, with an aura giving them bonuses, then they're probably going to survive it. But yeah, it does seem a little bit sucky. That's not to say that you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying okay, your character's now become a will-o-wisp. Yeah, I don't like the idea unless it's an evil aligned character. It makes much more sense if it's evil aligned rather than good or neutral, in my opinion. Okay, I think that's a good place to stop since nobody else has said anything. And Aaron, thank you for giving me all of your feedback and commenting in the chat box. I do appreciate that. It's really nice when people do that. I always feel like I'm alone if nobody says anything. And I'm going to leave everybody. I am probably going to try to cover the grey ooze tomorrow. So we're going to start dealing with the ooze. And I feel like I'm just about ready to start giving you some information on monster tactics for the grey ooze. You are welcome, Aaron. I do appreciate it. It's great that you've been following my videos. I know my videos are probably running at a horrible time for you because I'm in New Zealand, and you know our time zone's very different to everybody else's, obviously. Okay, that's it. I will see you guys later, and you guys have a good night, good day, whatever it is that you're currently having.